Welcome back to Mid-Maryland Votes. Today we're joined once again by one of our favorite guests, Republican Delegate Christopher Eric Bouchat. He represents District 5 in Carroll and Frederick counties. He's a straight-talking, sharp as a tack, and never afraid to go off script. It's been a few months and he's tackling new challenges head-on, so let's get into it. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we have a very dignified and wonderful guest, Delegate Chris Bouchat. Good to see you, Chris.
Thank you very much. Dignified. That's pushing a little, but I'll take it.
You're a very dignified man. Now, Chris, the last time you were on the show, we talked about you bringing us some deer bologna. Where is it? That's what I want to know. That's the most important question of the night.
That deer bologna is super fresh, still running around attached to a deer.
It's still in its natural state.
That's right. I'm keeping it fresh.
We like organic, so that's good.
Yes.
That's very good. Our last episode we had with you was wonderful. We talked about a variety of topics, a range of topics. And even the fact that you may or may not, you were considering running for governor of the state of Maryland. Where are you in that process now, sir?
Well, I have until February 24th to officially file. I pre-filed 11 bills with this session coming up with a wide range of issues: tax reform, repealing the emissions test, some constitutional, structural, political science changes, which I think are desperately needed to keep us from going over a fiscal cliff. So I got that out there. I'm looking forward to response from not only my party, but the other side of the aisle to see how I do with that. If the public really likes the agenda I put forward, then it'll start to build the populist momentum I need to file. So that'll give me halfway through the session as a barometer, a gauge to see where I'm at with it. Because I have to risk my business to make this move, and I really have to make sure I'm on solid ground. So I'm very much dependent upon the leadership of our party and the people out there in the public, whether they take to the message I have or not. That's the key. I cannot win unless I'm a populist candidate, and people really need to understand and buy into the reforms I'm putting forward to help the working class and senior citizens.
You know, for politicians that are not professional politicians, and there is a lot of personal sacrifice, professionally, personally, that your family would have to make. Can you just speak a bit more to what it really means on a personal level for a true public servant to kind of put it on the line in order to do these sorts of campaigns to represent the people?
Well, it's a sacrifice to do any of the public service. You want to given a lot of your time that would normally be applied to your family life or your regular, full-time career. It's difficult to maintain that full-time career that you survive on, your cash flow, so to speak, while you have this part-time civic duty. Because there's not only the official civic duty time, like when you're in session, but it's going through your emails. You get up in the morning or in the afternoon, and the evening, and there's always stuff coming at you from different directions that weighs on your mind. It's on your phone, it's in your email. You never seem to get away from it. And that pulls your attention away from your capitalist endeavors, your full-time job. So your full-time job really suffers from it. So if you're an employer and you have someone that's a representative, that employer is suffering. Now, if you own your own business and you do it, then your corporate capital is suffering as well, and your personal income. So it's a double whammy for a business person. It's a really big sacrifice.
It is the model, though, of our government from its very inception is that politicians would be part-time, that they would go to Congress, they would go in session, and then they go back to their farms or wherever it was they worked, their silversmiths or whatever, jack of all trades. They would go back to those professions, which gave them an incentive to pass the doggone legislation and get home, right?
Yeah.
Nowadays, these professional politicians, they want to hang out all day long because they're getting paid.
And it's a bit arrogant to think that out of all the people in my district, I'm the best one to represent everyone for 20, 30, 40 years. Give me a effing break. There's all kinds of demographics out there besides yourself that would come to the table and represent a different demographic in your community. It could be an elderly woman. It could be, a man of minority. There's all kinds of people that are ingrained in our society, and they should not be gauged by just that item alone, but it's what those demographics bring to the table with their culture and their understanding that make our nation such a great place. So it's important to cycle people and new generations. A younger generation looks at things differently than I do at 58. And you have to have that diversification at the table when you make your policy. You know, I'm not about forced DEI, so to speak, but in a meritous system, you naturally have diversification because only the good rise to the top. When you have any type of racist system, a lot of the dummies ride to the top because you're not allowing those with merit to rise up. So we need that constant cycle of people in service. I did one term as a commissioner. I'm doing one term as a delegate, and I want to move on. You wind up stagnant staying in one spot too long.
That, of course, is the big knock, the big negative on the DEI concepts that have swept over our country in the last 10, 15 years, is that they actually do. They're the opposite of meritorious, and so therefore they do create a lot of what you said, not the best rising to the top. But recently, we have something happening in our state where there is some turnover. The Speaker of the House of Delegates, which is where you serve, Adrienne Jones, she is stepping down. And by surprise, it was not announced beforehand, and this just happened, I think, in the last week or two. Do you have anything to add or any insight on that?
Yes, I'll be very cautious about this because our party, minority party leadership is very delicate about this issue out of tremendous respect for the speaker. She may be the leader of our party, but she is the leader of her institution. And I actually think it's quite brilliant, absolutely brilliant what she's doing. I give her major kudos for it. I won't get into the speculation of who's going to replace her. That's for them to do in their internal politics. But what she's doing from an administrative and a managerial standpoint and mentoring is really admirable because so often politicians will stay in that seat of power until their last day and not have the chance to help someone transition on the training wheels. So what she's doing with her last year of her term, most likely she'll retire and not run for re-election, is she's given someone else a chance to step up, be on their training wheels, so to speak, and have her there mentoring and helping and learning the ropes, so to speak. I think it's absolutely brilliant and it's going to be helpful for the institution. Regardless of what party affiliation she is, I believe it's important to recognize when people make smart decisions. And this is a very smart decision.
I really do appreciate the fact that Delegate Bouchat, that you treat the other party with respect, and I think that's missing in politics nowadays. The civility and the respect that we used to have for each other and different opinions in the past. What do you see as far as you bringing that in your own campaign and also political walk? How do you bring that more and more to the table every day?
I'm a big historical reader, as you're well aware of, and I read a book about, the Lincoln's cabinet was a team of rivals is the name of the book. And what he did is he ran for president, he won the nomination, and then he packed his cabinet with a lot of people that opposed him running for the nomination. And he did that because he recognized their brilliance and intelligence at the level he was at. And he was able to overlook those little petty things we get caught up emotionally or in policy, pressures from our constituents. They're just normal flaws and mistakes we all make. But at the core of his decisions was the fact that those are intelligent people. You need to bring them into your world. And that's how you have to be a good leader. I'll have differences with my colleagues, but do I think they're terrible people? No, I don't think they're terrible people. They're just reacting to pressures in their constituency that is different than mine or whoever else is being elected. And you have to allow the latitude for that. And that actually allows a person to excel further in life because you have less resistance outside your normal path or the normal party politics. To be successful, you need to step out of your comfort zone, face those challenges, build those relationships across party lines, and advance where you have commonality. Because when you do that, you learn that, I'm pretty much aligned with this guy on a lot of other issues. And you start breaking those barriers down. And the benefit of that is that your constituents, the people of the state, benefit the most.
We are all in agreement, just as humans. We are all in agreement on 95+% of everything. Now, that 5% or what have you that is different can be very important, but You're right. I mean, in American politics, the way they are today, but even in general, it can be easy to lose sight of the commonalities with all of the echo chambers and the, let's face it, I mean, the open propaganda that just divides us into groups. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are, because one concern that I have, or thought just based on what's happening nationally, and what your thoughts on how it may apply in statewide, is that there's been that move within the Democratic Party, and now that there's going to be a change in leadership, where it is more openly socialist. You know, you have Zohran Mamdani, who won in New York City, Katie Wilson, the new socialist mayor of Seattle, Washington, and there's a few other names you can throw into that mix. What are your thoughts or feelings about how that national move may or may not affect politics and here in Maryland?
Well, that's a good question. You know, these votes are emotional, and that's the swing vote that decides the election right now. That's the emotional voter in the center, and they're crushed with the economic forces. And that voter does not necessarily know who to truly blame, and whether it's relevant or not, whether you blame the Democrats or Republicans. The reality of their world is they can't afford their groceries. They can't afford to buy a house. They're not astute enough or digging into all the political literature and studying the news and know who to blame for it. All they know is whoever's in charge is screwing things up. And they'll boot people out and put new people in just out of desperation. They might not understand political science. They might not understand the economic policies that led to it, but they do know that financially they're struggling to stay afloat, and the reaction is impacting those elections. It can happen here in the reverse against the majority party, the Democrats, because they control everything. Who are they going to blame? They keep blaming President Trump, which is getting really worn out. And it's a bit of an immature statement to take. And I think the intellectuals within the Democratic Party know that. And Bill Ferguson's one of them. I'll give major credit to Bill Ferguson, too. Bill Ferguson is brilliant. He's historically intelligent. And he's quite courageous to take the position he has recently on the gerrymandering, because he foresees the challenges with the judicial system and how it can blow back on the party. Even though the emotion of his party is high, there's a bit of arrogance and self-confidence when you're the dominant single party running the state for so many years that they're overconfident. Well, Bill Ferguson, Senate President Ferguson's trying to pull back those reins. Let them know you don't overshoot your target and make a mistake at it. And even though people might not like him now in this party, on the long term, I think history is going to be extremely gracious to Bill Ferguson. And I'll give you a little bit of tidbit of information about Bill Ferguson and myself. We are the only two members of the Sons of the American Revolution who are serving in the American General Assembly right now. I'm a Republican in the House of Delegates. Bill Ferguson is a Democrat, president of the state Senate. We are entering into our 250th anniversary of our great nation. And we represent and help embody the principles of our founding fathers through our historical knowledge, bringing it to the table of how to apply it to our policy. And I'm hoping that my partnership with the other side, reaching across the aisle, can develop into something really great this next session that we can present as an accomplishment to the people in honor of our 250th anniversary. I'm looking forward to working with them on it.
I really appreciate you bringing up the gerrymandering issue. And for our listeners' benefit, just to go through it, Maryland is already considered the most gerrymandered state in the nation. Yet, the Democrats in both the Senate and the House of Delegates in Maryland are trying to gerrymander it even further. Bill Ferguson's point is you're going to wake a sleeping giant. It's going to be appealed to the Supreme Court, and all the maps could be thrown out as a result. So he's got a great point there, because it's quite likely that is going to happen. But there is going to be a fallout, and if it is approved, there certainly will be a lawsuit. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it'll definitely be tied up in court. And, I'm not much of a betting man, but I put my money on the state Supreme Court throwing out the whole gerrymandering process, and even potentially crack it wide open to redistrict it in their favor. You could wind up with 2 or 3 seats to Republicans, because the numbers are this: 52% of the registered voters in Maryland are Democrat. Around 26% are Republican, then around 21% are unaffiliated, a mixture of Green Party and Libertarian like that. So they only represent 52% of the registered voters. But somehow in their mind, they've conceived that they should get 100% of the seats to represent us. And they think that represents democracy. And that's so ironic and myopic in view. What you're saying is, oh, that 48% of the population, they should have no representation. Well, that flies in the face of what representative government's about, that why we have legislators elected by district so that those people in minority status can have representation. There's so much irony into the fact that there's minority political groups that wind up taking power, and then they want to make sure no one else can have power. It's like, I want to close the door behind me so no one else can get to where I'm at now. But politics needs to be like, say, Major League Baseball or football. Whoever wins a championship should not always get first round draft pick. And that's what gerrymandering does. So I'll give this sports analogy. You wind up taking over the General Assembly, and then every 10 years after that, you get to draw all the districts, so you get to get all the first-round draft picks. You can never lose the championship. Would anyone pay attention to Major League Baseball if every year the New York Yankees won the World Series? No, it wind up like professional wrestling, which we all know is fake. It's just entertainment. So basically what the General Assembly turned into is professional wrestling. It's fake. It's all entertainment to reach the end predetermined goals by the majority party in charge. And that's what we're faced with. They have all the first round draft picks to ensure that they keep getting reelected and stay in power.
I must say, though, as a former New Yorker, I kind of like the idea of the Yankees from Babe Ruth, and now we have Aaron Judge. Why not? Why not give us yeah.
Yeah, and as a Boston Red Sox fan, I would say that would be living in hell.
Well, it was for 70-something years for you guys. I'm not trying to gloat too much, but
right.
Yeah,
not too much anyway.
But that point is actually fantastic, is that what gerrymandering is it is giving the team that has the current advantage, and it is institutionalized and ensuring that they will have an unfair advantage into perpetuity. And that, of course, leads to one-party authoritarianism, essentially, I think, is what it's led to. And this has been going on for like 105 years in Maryland, with one-party rule. And it's not about one party being better or worse than the other, but essentially, is there ever a time throughout history where one group has complete control, where it has worked out well for the citizens, the individuals in that society?
No, it always winds up in corruption. You take what's going on now, professional sports and the betting. All that corruption's in it. All that corruption winds up in our government, too. We're hearing about, like, the Minnesota scandal over the welfare system, the nonprofits in Baltimore City, and now the stuff going on with Ivan Bates and the mayor. It makes you wonder, does Ivan Bates know something the rest of us don't know? Like, is there a federal investigation? Because there's been enough of them historically to Baltimore City elected officials. Why wouldn't there not be a federal investigation examining what's going on right now? So I have great respect for my friend Ivan Bates. He might know what's coming down the pike out of the luxury of his position and confidentiality. And this is a preemptive thing from the dude to distance himself from what might be coming down the pipeline.
Can you explain what you're referring to?
Well, they have the Safe Streets program. They have a lot of these nonprofits that are sucking money out of the budget. Their public finances are going to these unaccountable and unaudited nonprofits to address crime, do different things. And not that they're bad or should, you don't throw a baby out the bathwater, as the cliche goes. So there's value of some of these things out there. But you also have to have an auditing and accountability system within these, or you've instituted the corruption. If you tell someone, okay, every year you come to me and tell me, oh, the situation you've commissioned me to fix has gotten worse and you want more money. You don't ever come back and say, you know what, that committee gave me, I solved the problem. I don't need any more money. How many bureaucracies ever come back and say that? None.
When Elon Musk and the Doge Commission went and audited the actual accounts payable computer system of the federal government, something that apparently had not been done in decades. And one of the things that Elon Musk has said is that what that uncovered is what you just described. to a T, which is the extent to which the federal government, in his case, is what he's referring to, but the federal government sends money to institutions without accountability, without even being recorded properly. And that a lot of it ends up in these nonprofits that essentially are agents of fraud. For example, each homeless individual in Los Angeles is believed to provide over $900,000 in revenue to nonprofits. And in other words, it's exactly what you said. They are being paid to ensure that homeless people don't get homes because they're making $900,000 and they would lose that for each one who ended up in a home. And you're saying it's possible that there is a similar situation occurring in Baltimore in some regards.
Yes, and think about this. There's parallelisms to what President Eisenhower warned on his farewell address about the institutionalizing of the defense industry was all-consuming, and there's corruption in that. The perpetuation of creating this giant military machinery. Well, the pendulum swings to the left side, to the Democrats, and it's about the welfare social state. So it's almost the same parallel, but instead of spending on defense contractors in the private sector, they're spending on these private sector nonprofits that have all these lofty visions and goals, and they tear your heart out. And I'm a Catholic, so I have a bleeding heart at times. And on the front, the value looks really good. You're contributing to a good thing, but behind the scenes, you have to wonder, well, how come that nonprofit CEO is making $500,000? If it's truly a nonprofit and you believe in that nonprofit, why are you taking such a large salary out of an institution that's supposed to help the poor? You're not poor. As a Christian, that's not how I view like the life of Christ and how to help other people. You want to give, and I don't think a lot of them see it that way. And here's another how it feeds itself. I said nonprofit gets all this government money. Well, then they make contributions to the people that vote them the money, us.
Yes.
So, and that's what I was getting at about post-COVID. What has shifted is the money has been taken from the people. The working class people in this state are being beaten down and drained with inflation. Meanwhile, the special interest groups have bought into and lobbied the institution I'm in, the General Assembly, to get their chunk of the federal tax dollar. So now they have money, we don't. The politicians need money to get reelected. Who did they turn to? The special interest groups that they help give the money to in the first. It's a vicious circle. And who's left outside of this circle? The average working man who's busting his butt trying to support his family. He don't have time to pay an expensive lobbyist or attorneys and accountants to represent him. He's too busy trying to make a living to support his family.
And I think you're exactly describing why we're seeing major metropolitan areas starting to vote socialist. Because as we talked about earlier, they're just frustrated. They don't know where else to turn. The system has become corrupt in many, many ways. There seems to be no lightening of the load on the working man, the working class, and they're willing to give a failed economic plan like socialism a shot because in their minds, there's nothing left for them in the regular two-party system.
And it's scary too, because as a disciple of history, I see how dangerous that can take a society. The French Revolution, though it's noble in the beginning, wound up the reign of terror of a lot of people being executed with their heads chopped off.
And completely unsuccessful because they put a monarch back in 14 years later.
Yeah, but they had this lofty vision, and the same with the Russian Revolution, same with the Chinese Revolution, and they wind up failing upon themselves. And they'll exploit the ignorance of the masses. That's their biggest weapon in their trade, is you tell those people what they want to hear, and they'll buy it because they have the ignorance with them and don't comprehend the full spectrum of why they are in this position. All they know is the simplicity of what you're selling them. And I tell people there's a strong parallelism between a womanizer and a politician. And it's the fact that you will tell them what you think they want to hear to get to the goal you're after, and you have absolutely no intention whatsoever of fulfilling what you're telling them you're going to do, because you're selfish and want what you want over what they want. And that's how politicians are like womanizers.
So I once heard a car salesman make the exact same analogy. Interesting. Well, your points are very well made, and it's very scary that we are at the very beginnings of what historically has led to tragic outcomes. I mean, you mentioned countries from decades ago, a century ago, but you could just look at El Salvador and what the Venezuela,
Cuba.
Yeah, you just
goes on and on and on.
Yes.
Russia, China.
Yes, and
North Korea. It's just endless.
Yes, and so how do we break this cycle before it gets more tragic?
I got bills submitted, their constitutional amendments to the state constitution to give more autonomy to the people. The number one building block that would solve all of this is for the citizens of Maryland to truly be sovereign over the General Assembly, and they're not. And they're not because the citizens do not draw our districts. They may vote for us, which is this facade of democracy, but those districts are predetermined by a computer software package by the leaders of the party that run the General Assembly, so they predetermine the outcomes. So there is truly no democracy. It's just a self-perpetuation of power. So my bill would give the citizen convention elect 188 citizens statewide from all the counties, and they'd be prohibited from being an elected official. You just a regular citizen who hears the concerns of your county and the delegation you're elected to. And then you go to this convention after the census, only every 10 to 12 years after the census, because the census is needed to determine how many citizen delegates to elect from all 24 subdivisions of the state. That ensures the voices of citizens throughout the state are at that table drawing the districts of their legislators, and that the General Assembly has no ability to stop what the citizens pass as law for the General Assembly districts and the congressional districts. All they can do is challenge it if they pass a majority vote by both chambers in my bill that says, we think that the redistricting by the citizen convention is illegal or contradicts law. They can send it to the state Supreme Court. Then the state Supreme Court has the ultimate jurisdiction to review the complaints or the challenges by the General Assembly, along with any of the citizens throughout the state of Maryland. Just like what I did in 2024, I sued the state directly over the redistricting. Any citizen would be able to challenge the districts. But the most important thing of this that will end the gerrymandering is the fact that representatives who are just average citizens from all the counties from across the state would come together and draw districts that are selfish. And here's the key, which is a bit ironic and counterintuitive, is selfish to their county's special interests. And that's why I keep telling people is the genius that unlocks this that Hamilton and Madison understood with the Constitutional Convention. In order to stop any one particular group from dominating, and in this case it is the Maryland Democratic Party running a General Assembly, is to have those special interest groups of the citizens at the table. 24 different counties coming together, we're going to pull at one another and level it out where it needs to be. Just like the Constitution, not everyone's going to be happy, but it's going to be the closest thing to perfection we can have, because no single entity would dominate the redistricting process, and the selfish interests of all 24 of those counties would inoculate us from this. And that's the genius of it all.
And so if I'm understanding what you're saying properly, is essentially you're offering a solution to the gerrymandering we were referring to earlier in the conversation. And you're saying that citizens, as opposed to politicians, should get together and actually determine the districting as opposed to all the politicians from the majority political party.
What an absolutely radical, crazy idea that is.
Yeah.
Most common
Citizens actually determining. That's radical.
Yeah.
In other words, citizens get to determine the draft as opposed to the draft going to the championship team.
And to Ethan's point, there's never a super majority in any state, whether it be all red or all blue, that works out well for the citizens. As you said, it has a tendency to be corrupt. And if you look at the states that are struggling the most, the majority of them have super majorities.
Yeah, and then you take some place like, let's do the microcosm of Baltimore City. And we're seeing how bad that corruption is impacting the working class. You see that report that said the average working class property taxpayer in Baltimore City pays more property tax than the millionaire or the big business because they assess them differently. Plus, all the corporations they try to lure into the state, which this is another thing the state does that's terrible, is they sell everything away to get the business here, and it winds up costing us more money. Oh, we'll give you all these tax breaks and tax credits. You don't have to pay property tax. We'll get you here. Okay. And then meanwhile, you ship your own employees in here from other branch offices. You don't even hire that many people from Maryland. So we're subsidizing the payroll of your business. And then once the tax breaks and subsidies run out, they realize their business model does not work in Maryland.
Right.
So what do? They pack up and leave. Meanwhile, our local officials have given all this free giveaways and then have to push that tax burden onto the average working class citizen because, once again, they're too busy working and don't have high dollar lobbyists working for them.
And the state of Maryland right now is the 4th or 5th most expensive state to live in the entire country. And although Governor Moore says he's given us tax breaks to the middle class, that we all know that through his fee structure. Yeah, the fees that he's charging, I think I just read that there's like 400 new fees on vehicles alone. That through this fee, which we all know, fees are just taxes disguised. It's just become unaffordable to live in Maryland anymore, and it's a shame because it's a state that we have all decided to live in.
Of course, this leads to this combination of whether it's fraud, inefficiency, just bad policy as a result of knowing that you're going to remain in power no matter what the consequences are. We end up with yet another record-setting deficit, essentially, of $1.4 billion. I mean, the redistricting and bringing sanity to politics, is that the solution, ultimately?
That's the most fundamental building block. Until we correct the gerrymandering, nothing else is truly going to solve the problem. We can patchwork it up, but there's always a problem with patchwork and the patchwork over the patchwork. It's unstable and it'll crumble until you go to the basic fundamental foundational principle that the citizens are sovereign, everything will fall apart. But what I do offer for the economic side is that 3% flat tax policy I have. That taxes at a same rate, 3%, whether you earn income, invest, or consume. So the sales tax is 6%, will be cut in half to 3%. The corporate income tax for Maryland will be 3%. The personal wage income tax will be 3%. And your capital gains tax will be 3%. Plus, we'll have a $10,000 tax exempt initial capital gains fee for senior citizens, because senior citizens depend heavily on capital gains on their Social Security, or not just their IRAs and 401ks when they retire. So this gives a little bit of tax break. And that's really critical right now because we're going over a fiscal cliff. And here's what's happening. Because the state of Maryland is so unaffordable, senior citizens, when they retire, are fleeing. Well, a lot of them are taking with them their pensions from the state. So our tax dollars are paying their pensions and helping subsidize the economies of the Carolinas and Florida, we're just hemorrhaging money out. Then you have a younger generation who can't afford to buy houses. They're fleeing the state too, or they're working mobile, and then because their taxes are high, they shop in all this. We're a small state; they shop in all the surrounding states. So it's crushing our economy. And with less younger people to pay into a wage-based tax system, our budgets are getting smaller and smaller. But we need to level that out with a balanced 3%. So no matter whether you're earning, investing, or spending, it stabilizes the cash flow. That would create a tremendous bump in economic activity, not only for corporate investment, because it would make us a low tax rate in the Mid-Atlantic region for investment, but this is who will hit initially really quick. The average working class person and family spends far more money on sales tax. Mm-hmm. The sales tax they spend is a larger percentage of their overall income than a wealthy person. So if you cut the sales tax from 6 to 3, immediately working class families have more consumption power with their money. And here's another big benefit for working class people. I'm still a welder technically, but before I owned a welding business and I was punching a time clock for someone, It was discouraging to work a 52-hour and sometimes 60-hour week busting your ass. And then you look at the percentage of the money you get after the government takes their hunk out of it. It's discouraging that you realize the harder you work, the less percentage of your money you're getting. The government wants to take more of it. The same thing happens to poor people working 2 jobs. It throws you in a different tax bracket to take more of your money. You wind up struggling to try to get out of this hole, and the government keeps taking a larger percentage of it. So if you have a 3% flat income tax, those average working class people putting it overtime in, whether you're a police officer, a teacher, or whatever you're doing, you don't bring home more of your hard-earned money because, by God, you earned it. It's your money. And they'll immediately bounce their lower middle class or lower class up in the middle and help their consumption. That stimulates local economies, too, with that money they're going to consume in their economy. It's an immediate boost to their economy instead of what we're doing now, running in the opposite direction, causing people to flee the state.
You know, in what you're describing, Delegate Bouchat, is what throws a lot of people into panic. When you talk about cutting taxes in order to improve the life of citizens and the business model for your state, people start panicking, especially if they're on the blue side of the aisle.
I don't think they realize how counterintuitive both political and economic science is. And the best analogy I try to give you, like with the tax cuts actually stimulate growth, is the first person that came out and said, you know, if I infect you with cowpox, it'll stop you from getting pox. They'd say, go F yourself. You're cuckoo crazy. You're not infecting me. That will not work. Well, guess what? Science proves it's counterintuitive and it's correct. So you inoculate yourself to prevent yourself from getting the disease. So I look at these situations that way. You think it's going to be bad, but it's not truly bad, because what you're actually doing is you're giving more money back to the free market, and the free market will dictate the level of success we have. When you take money out of the private sector and the government takes it, it's such a waste of bureaucracy and overhead. All right, the government takes $1 from you because they're going to spend it somewhere else to stimulate the economy. But you're lucky if 10 cents reaches what they're supposed to stimulate. It's just like the whole fraud of foreign aid. That is the biggest corrupt scam going out there, and there's international corporations that are just making tons of profit off the aid we as a nation send to other countries. If cents on a dollar reach their end result, we're lucky. It's all the handlers in between that are siphoning off. And that's the inherent corruption that exists in our government. Keep the government out, keep it as small and as regulatory at a minimum as possible, and allow the free market to thrive and lift people up out of poverty, which is the exact opposite of what we're seeing the voters do in like the New York election. It's a matter of having the proper candidates and articulation, trying to identify and meet with people. And since I come to the table with a blue-collar working-class background, achieve success as a businessman, I understand and represent that category. It's out there. I speak their language, and that's what people want. Someone who can speak to them and identify with them.
Delegate Bouchat, we definitely enjoy listening to you, and we can identify with you as well, because we all enjoy the same things in life, which is deer bologna.
Yes.
So you'll be bringing it on the next show.
You got it.
Delegate Bouchat, it's been awesome having you again. We enjoy your mind, your humor. We enjoy your presence. Hopefully you come back and grace us again here on Mid-Maryland Votes.
Well, gentlemen, I must say I'm blessed. I ran into Ethan at the Republican Lincoln Day dinner up there in Washington County. Lovely people. We have such a lovely community. And in fact, you guys do this as a reflection of that community that's out there, that we all interact and communicate over these issues like this. So you're providing a very important service to our community. Thank you.
So, Delegate Bouchat, was there alcohol available at that dinner? Because rarely do people describe running into Ethan as being a pleasant experience. So, was there eggnog present or something?
Well, there might have been, but I ain't consume. Actually, I don't know if I told you, but I'm a recovering alcoholic, 8 years into recovery. So
congratulations, Delegate Bouchat. I am 32 years into recovery right now.
Fantastic.
Wonderful, isn't it?
It's nice to share our recovery with others, to inspire others that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And it actually makes us greater people. That's why I say adversity in life hones us like Damascus steel, so we're tougher and sharper.
Right. And as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another.
Exactly.
Delegate Bouchat, thank you so much for being with us today, and we hope to see you again soon. This has been Mid-Maryland Votes with Delegate Chris Bouchat. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host, Ethan Lowen. If you liked what you saw, if you liked what you heard, like and share it with a friend. And we'll see you next time on Mid-Maryland Votes.
That was Delegate Christopher Eric Bouchat. Honest, intelligent, and unapologetically real. He doesn't deal in slogans, he deals in problems and solutions. Whether you agree with him or not, conversations like this are how Maryland moves forward. Thanks for listening to Mid-Maryland Votes. Like, follow, and share for more real talk that matters.